In February 2021, the power grid in Texas failed for 4 days. The official death toll was 246 people. Almost none of them were killed by the storm itself. When you picture a blackout going badly, you probably picture something dramatic. Looters. Empty shelves. That is not what the records show. Most of the people who died that week died indoors. Behind a locked door. Many of them warm. Doing something they believed was keeping them alive. And here is the part that should unsettle you, because it is the opposite of what everyone assumes. The people who die in the first 72 hours are very often not the unprepared ones. In a lot of cases, they are the ones who went out and bought the equipment. We are going to count down 10 mistakes. Number 10 costs you a week of groceries. Number 1 kills hundreds of Americans every year, and it kills them in the exact moment they think they have finally solved the problem. But mistake number 10 starts before the lights have even finished flickering. So first, you need to understand the clock. Think back to the last blackout you remember from childhood. Somebody finds the flashlight in the kitchen drawer. Candles come out. The kids think it is an adventure. And a few hours later, everything hums back on. The microwave clock is blinking 12, and the whole thing becomes a story. Millions of people have that memory, and it built an assumption most Americans still carry. A blackout is an inconvenience with a bedtime. Two things changed underneath that assumption, and almost nobody was told. The first is that outages have not just become more frequent. They have become longer, concentrated in the major multi-day events, driven by extreme weather hitting infrastructure designed for a different century. The second is the one nobody talks about. Your house got worse at keeping you alive. The 1985 house had a gas furnace with a standing pilot light that ran without electricity. It had a chimney. The stove lit with a match. The phone on the wall worked during an outage because it drew power from the line itself. There was a paper phone book, a road atlas in the car, a radio, and a flashlight in the drawer. The house you are sitting in now most likely has a high-efficiency furnace with electronic ignition, which produces no heat at all without power, even though it burns gas. It may have a well pump, which means no electricity is also no water. Sealed windows, no chimney, maybe an electric range. No landline. And the phone book, the map, the radio, the flashlight, and every phone number you know all live inside one device with a battery that lasts a day. The house got smarter, and in the exact same span of years, it quietly stopped being able to keep you alive on its own. So let us put numbers on the clock. 4 hours. That is how long an unopened refrigerator holds food at a safe temperature. Not a day. 4 hours. 48 hours for a full freezer. 24 if it is half full. 15 minutes. That is roughly how long the water keeps running in a high-rise after the pumps stop, because the water in your building is being pushed uphill by electricity. 3 days. That is what every official preparedness guideline in the country tells you to plan for. Now the other number. The major grid events of the last decade, Texas in 2021, Puerto Rico after Maria, the ice storms, the hurricane aftermaths, have routinely run past a week. Some ran into months. You are told to prepare for 3 days. The events that actually kill people run 7 and beyond. That gap, 4 days wide, is where every story in this video lives. 2 more, because they matter later. In a hard freeze, a well-insulated house with no heat can drop roughly 20 degrees in 24 hours, and it keeps falling. In summer, an indoor temperature above the mid-80s becomes genuinely dangerous for elderly people and for anyone with heart or lung conditions. Your house is not a sealed box holding conditions steady. It is a bucket with a slow leak. Power is the thing that has been refilling it your entire life. And here is what makes this crisis different from almost anything else you see coverage of. It is nearly invisible. Blackout deaths do not happen in public. There is no footage. They get counted weeks later by a county medical examiner's office and released as a revised total after the news cycle has moved on. which is why the public image of a blackout is looters, and the reality is a spreadsheet. And on that spreadsheet, three causes dominate: carbon monoxide, temperature in both directions, and the interrupted medical routine, not violence, not starvation. Nobody starves in 72 hours. But here is the detail that reframes this entire subject. The deaths do not cluster in hour 1. They cluster after hour 24 and peak in the second and third days. Hour 1, everybody behaves. Everybody is calm and waiting for it to come back on. Hour 30 is different. Hour 30 is cold or hot and dark, and you have not slept, and the kids are miserable, and the food is going bad, and the outage map has not updated in 6 hours. Hour 30 is when people stop waiting and start improvising. Almost every death in this video is somebody solving a problem. That is what makes it so hard to see coming. So the real question is not whether you would survive some kind of collapse. That question is fiction. The real question is smaller and much more uncomfortable. It is whether, somewhere around hour 30, cold and tired and out of options, with people you love looking at you to fix it, you would make the same completely reasonable decision that killed all of them. Let us start the countdown. Mistake number 10. Assuming it's temporary, the lights go out. And the first thing every one of us does is nothing. You wait. You look out the window to see if the neighbors are out too. And you assume, without ever really deciding to, that this is the 20-minute kind, because that is what it has always been before. Psychologists call this normalcy bias. It is the brain's default setting that the next hour will look like the last one. It is usually correct, which is exactly why it is so dangerous the small percentage of the time that it is not. And it burns the most valuable 15 minutes you are ever going to get. Because right now, everything is still easy. You can see. The water is still pressurized in the pipes. Your phone is at whatever percentage it was at. The gas station still has a working pump. So this is the moment you fill containers. Every pot, every bottle, the bathtub. Because in a lot of outages, the water goes out too, and filling a bathtub is trivial right now and impossible in 6 hours. This is when you consolidate the freezer and shut it. When you check the fuel gauge, because gas pumps are electric. When you get cash, because card readers are electricity too. Nobody does any of this. Because during the first hour, nothing has gone wrong yet. Which is precisely what makes it the most valuable hour you will get. Mistake number 9. Burning the phone. The power goes out and the phone comes out, and for 2 hours you are refreshing the outage map, scrolling local Facebook groups, texting everyone you know, screen at full brightness because it is dark now. By nightfall, you are at 30%, and you do not think much of it because you have never in your adult life needed to. Consider what that device now is. It is your radio, your flashlight, your emergency contact, your map, your medication list, and every phone number of every person who would come and get you. Your grandparents had 6 separate objects doing those jobs. You have one, and it is at 30%. So, airplane mode, immediately. Brightness down. 1 check per hour, not 1 per minute. Get a power bank now and keep it charged in a drawer, because a power bank you have to remember to charge during an emergency is a decoration. And get an actual radio. A cheap hand crank NOAA weather radio costs about the same as 2 pizzas. Cell towers have backup batteries measured in hours, not days. In extended outages, coverage degrades, and then it goes. The radio does not care. You will not miss the phone at 20%. You will miss it at 3 in the morning on night 2. Mistake number 8. Opening the refrigerator to check. Every time that door opens, you dump the cold air onto your kitchen floor and the clock speeds up. The 4-hour rule assumes an unopened door. Open it 5 times and you do not have 4 hours. The correct sequence is simple and almost nobody follows it. Day 1, you eat out of the fridge. All of it in order of what dies first: milk, meat, leftovers. You have a genuinely excellent meal on day 1, and you feel slightly ridiculous doing it. The freezer does not open, not once, not to check. If it stays shut, you still have safe frozen food nearly 2 days later, and that becomes day 2 and day 3 of eating. But the real danger comes on day 3, and it is a decision, not an accident. Somebody opens the fridge, picks up the chicken, smells it, and says it seems fine. It does not work that way. The bacteria that put you in an emergency room do not announce themselves by smell, and food that has sat above 40 degrees for a day and a half can look and smell completely normal. If in doubt, throw it out. That is the actual federal guidance. Food poisoning on a normal Tuesday is a bad day. Food poisoning in a house with no running water, no working toilet, and an emergency room already on generators is a completely different illness. Quick one before we keep going. Has your power ever been out for more than a full day? Drop how long in the comments. It is far more common than people realize. Mistake number 7. Going outside. 2 ways this kills people, and both are ordinary. The first is downed lines. Treat everyone as live. Not most of them, all of them. Lines can re-energize without warning when crews restore a section upstream. And the danger is not just the wire. Voltage spreads outward through wet ground and standing water, which means you can be seriously injured without touching anything. You do not investigate. You back away and call it in. The second is quieter and kills more people. Traffic. In a widespread outage, every signalized intersection legally becomes a 4-way stop. Roughly half the people on the road do not know that or forget it under stress. So you get an intersection with no lights, no streetlights, no lit signage, and 2 drivers who each believe they have the right of way. Add the mundane one that ends independence for a lot of older people permanently. A fall on unlit stairs, in a hallway you have walked 1,000 times. The dark does not have to hurt you. It just removes every ordinary safeguard around things that were always slightly dangerous. Mistake number 6. Candles. This is the single most recognizable image of a blackout. It is also a genuinely bad idea, and the fire data is not subtle about it. Candle fires spike measurably during outages. The reason is not carelessness in the way people imagine. It is that a candle is an open flame in a dark house full of tired people moving around in unfamiliar conditions, near curtains, near paper, near a cat, near a child, and increasingly near somebody who has fallen asleep because it is night and there is nothing else to do. And the fire department, during a widespread outage, is not the one you are used to. Response times stretch because call volume spikes. In some events, water pressure is reduced because pumping stations are down. The fire that would have been contained on a normal night is not necessarily contained on this one. The replacement costs almost nothing. LED lanterns and headlamps, 1 per person, stored with the batteries out so they do not corrode. A headlamp changes the entire experience of an outage because it gives you both hands back. A lantern runs for days on batteries you already own, and it cannot fall over onto a curtain. The candle is the most photogenic thing in a blackout. It is also the reason some blackouts end in a house fire. Mistake number 5. Ignoring the thermometer. This is the one people miss because it moves too slowly to notice. Temperature does not arrive, it drifts, and your body is genuinely bad at detecting that drift, especially if you are older, especially if you have been sitting still. In the cold direction, the house drops a few degrees an hour. You put on a sweater, then another one. And hypothermia does not announce itself with pain. It announces itself with confusion and drowsiness and a strange sense that everything is fine. People who survive it consistently report feeling okay an hour before they stopped being okay. In the heat direction, the numbers are worse. In the 1995 Chicago heatwave, 739 excess deaths occurred over about a week in a major American city, mostly indoors. And in both directions, the core mistake is identical. People try to condition the whole house. You cannot. Every degree you spend on the empty guest bedroom is a degree you are not putting into a human being, so you pick one room. The smallest interior room, fewest exterior walls and windows. In winter, you close the door, hang blankets over the windows, towels along the bottom of the door, and everybody sleeps in there together. Kids, adults, pets. Body heat in a small closed room is a real and substantial heat source. In summer, you do the opposite. Lowest floor, shaded, ventilated at night when the outside air drops below the inside air, closed up during the day. And put a cheap thermometer where you can see it, because the point of the number is to override what your body is telling you. Your body will tell you it is fine. The thermometer will not. Mistake number 4. Forgetting the medical dependency. This is the item that gets covered least and matters most. If you send one part of this video to somebody, make it this one. For millions of Americans, a blackout is not an inconvenience with a medical footnote. The blackout is the medical emergency from minute 1. Insulin that needs refrigeration. Oxygen concentrators, which are electric machines, not tanks. CPAP, home dialysis, powered wheelchairs and lifts, nebulizers. Here is the thing almost nobody knows. Most utilities maintain a medical priority registry. You call, you get a form, your doctor signs it, and your address is flagged. It does not guarantee you get power first, and no utility will promise that, but it puts you into their notification system and their restoration planning, and it costs one phone call on a Tuesday when nothing is wrong. Alongside that, know your pharmacy's emergency refill policy before you need it. Keep a written medication list on paper with dosages and your doctor's number, because your phone is dead and the pharmacy's computer is down and nobody can look you up. And talk to your actual doctor about what your specific dependency looks like without power, because that answer is different for insulin than for oxygen than for a heart condition, and it is not something a video should be telling you. The rest of this list is about avoiding harm. This one is about people for whom the harm starts on its own, with no mistake required at all. Mistake number 3. Getting water wrong. Two opposite errors, and people manage both in the same 48 hours. The first is rationing thirst. It sounds responsible. It does not work. Your body does not stretch. What it does is get dehydrated, and mild dehydration produces headache, fatigue, and impaired judgment, the exact resource you cannot afford to lose. Because in 18 hours, you are going to make a decision about a generator or a heater, and you need to make it correctly. You ration food. You do not ration water. You solve the supply problem instead. Which brings up the thing sitting in your basement right now. Your water heater holds 30 to 50 gallons of clean drinking water, and it has a drain valve on the bottom. Cut the power or gas to it, close the intake, open a hot tap upstairs to break the vacuum, and drain what you need. The second error is assuming the tap is safe. When pressure drops, contamination can enter the system, which is why boil water advisories follow major outages so reliably. And the vicious part is the timing. The advisory goes out over systems you may not be able to receive, telling you to boil water on a stove you may not be able to run. Unscented household bleach in very small measured quantities is a standard disinfection method. Get the exact ratio from the EPA or your health department and write it on the bottle now, because it is not a number you want to guess at by lantern light. You can go 3 days without food and be completely fine. 3 days without water is not a discomfort story. If this is giving you a clearer picture than the usual advice, a like helps it reach the people who need it. Number 2 is the one almost nobody puts on a list like this. Mistake number 2. Isolation. Back to Chicago, 1995, because a sociologist named Eric Kleinenberg did something with that disaster nobody had done before. He went in afterward and asked, block by block, why some neighborhoods lost enormous numbers of people, and neighborhoods right next to them barely lost anyone. He compared areas with nearly identical demographics. Same poverty rate, same age profile, same housing stock, same heat, and the death rates differed by a factor of several. The variable was not income. It was not air conditioning. It was not age. It was whether anybody would notice you were gone. The neighborhoods that survived had functioning street life. Shops people walked to. Neighbors who knew which apartment the elderly man lived in and knocked when they had not seen him. The neighborhoods that lost people had residents who were physically fine and completely alone, behind locked doors, in apartments nobody had a reason to check. That finding has held up in disaster after disaster since. So the mistake runs in two directions. You do not check on anyone. The elderly neighbor 2 doors down, the woman on oxygen at the end of the hall. You assume somebody else has it handled? In the neighborhoods where people die, everybody assumed that. And the harder one to hear, you are the person nobody has a reason to check on. You have lived somewhere 6 years and do not know a single name on your street. If you went quiet for 4 days, there is no mechanism by which anybody would find out. The fix takes one afternoon and costs nothing. Know 3 names on your street. Make sure 3 people know yours. Know which one has a wood stove, which one is a nurse, and which one should not be alone for 3 days. You cannot buy this one. It is not in any kit. And it outperforms nearly everything that is. Mistake number 1. I told you at the start that the people who die in the first 72 hours are often the ones who prepared. This is what I meant. Carbon monoxide is colorless. It is odorless. You cannot taste it and you cannot feel it entering the room. It binds to your blood hundreds of times more readily than oxygen does, so it does not have to be present in large amounts to displace the thing keeping you alive. But that is not what makes it number 1. What makes it number 1 is the symptoms. Headache, nausea, dizziness, drowsiness, confusion. Read that list again and ask yourself what it describes. It describes being cold, exhausted, dehydrated, and stressed in hour 30 of a blackout. Carbon monoxide poisoning presents as exactly the situation you are already in. So the warning your body gives you is one you will almost certainly dismiss because you have a perfectly good explanation for every symptom on the list. And the drowsiness is not a coincidence. The drowsiness is the mechanism. People do not stagger outside for air. They lie down. Here is how it actually happens, and it is not a story about reckless people. It is night 2. The house is down into the 40s. There is a generator in the garage, bought last year after the last one of these. It is raining, and running it out in the open feels wrong, and you have heard about generators being stolen off porches. So it goes in the attached garage with the door raised 1.5 feet for ventilation, which feels like a sensible compromise. The house comes up to temperature for the first time in 2 days. The kids stop complaining. Somebody makes a hot meal. And for the first time since this started, everyone sleeps properly. There is no smell. There is no sound. There is no alarm, because the carbon monoxide detector in the hallway is hardwired into the house, and the power is out. Nobody wakes up because there is nothing to wake up to. So here are the rules. Screenshot these. Generators run outdoors only. Not in a garage, not in a breezeway, not in a shed, not under a carport, not with the door open. 20 feet minimum from the house, exhaust pointed away from every window, door, and vent. An open garage door does not make a garage outdoors. That is the single most common fatal misunderstanding in this entire subject. Never a charcoal grill indoors, in a garage, or in a fireplace. Never a gas grill indoors. Never a camp stove indoors. Never the gas oven or the range as a space heater with the door open. This is common in cold snaps, and it is extremely dangerous. Any unvented propane or kerosene heater is a combustion device inside your living space. If you use one, it must be rated for indoor use. It must have a working oxygen depletion sensor, and it needs ventilation you would consider excessive. And get battery-powered carbon monoxide alarms. One on every level, one outside every sleeping area. Test them today. Because the hardwired unit in your hallway is decorative during precisely the event it exists for, go and check which one you own. Portable generators are, year after year, the leading consumer product cause of non-fire carbon monoxide deaths in the United States. And those deaths do not cluster during storms. They cluster in the days after, when the wind has died down and the danger appears to have passed. Which brings us to the thing that makes this genuinely difficult to sit with. The person who owns nothing sits in the cold, miserable, and alive. The person who spent $600 specifically so their family would not have to suffer through another one of these is the one at risk. Every one of those choices, the garage, the grill, the oven, the heater, is somebody trying to take care of the people they love. Not one of them is a story about carelessness. They are stories about a reasonable decision made in the dark by someone who was tired. So here is the idea underneath all 10 of these. Nobody survives a blackout with equipment. They survive it with decisions they already made. The households that come through cleanly are almost never the ones with the biggest kit. Ask them afterward and they will tell you the gear barely mattered. They knew where the water shutoff was. They knew their neighbor's first name and which neighbor was on oxygen. They knew the generator lives 20 feet out on the far side of the driveway. Always, no exceptions, no matter what the weather is doing. They knew which room gets closed off and slept in. They knew the freezer does not open. They knew all of it on an ordinary Tuesday, when nothing was wrong, when knowing it felt slightly ridiculous. Because that is when it has to be known. Every one of these 10 mistakes is made by an intelligent, careful person trying to solve an urgent problem in the dark, with degraded judgment, with people depending on them, at hour 30 of something they expected to last 2 hours. This was never a list of failures. It is a list of reasonable ideas, arriving at exactly the wrong moment. And when the next one happens, people will fall into 3 groups. There are the people for whom 72 hours is genuinely just a long weekend. Ask them how, and they will not talk about gear. They thought about it once on a Saturday afternoon and made 4 small purchases and a phone call. There are the improvisers, and this is most of us. They get through on a series of decisions that could easily have broken the other way. They tell the story afterward as a funny one, and they mostly do not know how close it was. And there are the people for whom none of this is a preparedness question at all. The elderly, the medically fragile, the person living alone at the end of the hall. For them, survival is not about what they bought. It is about whether somebody else remembered they exist. Which of those 3 you end up in is mostly decided long before the lights go out. 246 people in Texas, indoors, behind locked doors, many of them warm, doing something they believed was keeping them alive. None of this asks you to become a different person or build a bunker. It is one afternoon of an ordinary week. A battery-powered carbon monoxide alarm, 2 LED lanterns and a headlamp for each person, a case of water and a drain valve you know how to open, a cheap radio, 1 phone call to your utility if somebody in your house depends on a machine, and 3 names on your street. The lights come back. They almost always come back. And within 2 weeks, the whole thing gets filed away, as the weekend everything was closed and the food went bad. Which is exactly why nobody is ready for the next one. So tell me honestly, what is the longest you have ever gone without power, and what is the one thing you wished you had? Put it below. Somebody is going to read your answer before their own bad night.